Okay, so before we move on, I think we can all agree so far the Elder are still the worst of what we looked at this moment. How well the Necrons doing?
On a firepower scale, the Necrons are just about unmatched. On a protection scale, most of their vehicles make me facepalm. Except the Monolith. The Monolith is stupidly well protected, but the majority of their vehicles basically scream, "Shoot at me, please, I will explode." So they've had a couple good. They've had one or two really good ideas as far as protection goes, but for firepower purposes, they have a lot of scary firepower. I'm guessing this is kind of an army that strictly doesn't care necessarily if its troops get blown up or not, especially since they tend to get back up, and more prefers the whole how much goes with the orc philosophy. How much DACA can I fit onto this?
Yeah.
Which brings us to the Tomb Spider, which I find incredibly creepy.
Yes. Now, Tomb Spiders, they are essentially just drones. Now, while still formidable foes, they are armed with hives of scarabs, which are smaller Necron automata. They also have self-repair backup systems and are capable of repairing other Necron warriors on the field of battle. Now, they're also known of being capable of directing wraiths into battle, wraiths being another type of Necron troop, which means there's not only this kind of a recovery / medical automata, it's also a kind of command vehicle as well, like a secondary command officer. And it also has the ability to manufacture swarms of diminutive drones in vast clouds.
Where do I start? Let's begin with the fact that the Tomb Spider is apparently a bioweapon. Manufactures swarms of diminutive drones that like constructs in vast shimmering clouds. I'm gonna hurl a squad of nanomachines at you and see what happens. That's terrifying. Second, it's incredibly well armored. For what should be considered, quote, a rear-line medic and construction drone, this thing is covered in armor plates. And it has dreadnought-style firepower. What do I mean by this? A lot of Imperial dreadnoughts that I see for the Space Marines have guns mounted in their claws. I think they might have got that idea from the Necrons. Because here we see, I have a Tomb Spider here that has not only this three-pronged constructor claw with deadly spikes on it, but there's a gun inside the claw. So it's going to grab the target and then shoot it for spite purposes. This may be considered, quote, a self-repair backup and a constructor, but if it has to actually go into combat, I would refer to this as an intimidation weapon. There's no point on any of these things except for directly underneath it, and if you're directly underneath it, you're probably screaming bloody murder, that is not covered with armor plating. It looks like it could even ball up like an armadillo if it had to protect itself. On top of that, it's got the equivalent of dreadnought claws for melee weapons with guns in them. And as far as walkers go, I'm assuming that like everything else in the Necron army, this thing flies.
Yes, it has got anti-grav capability.
But if it has to walk anywhere, as far as walkers are concerned, spider legs are kind of the way to go, because with a spider, even if all but two of the spider's legs are broken, it can still move. This thing can still move with most of its legs broken and its anti-grav system knocked out. So I'm surprised that they don't rig like, the Gauss cannons onto these things and make these things their main battle tanks. That would be an amazing weapon of war. But, you know what? If you want to make it a nanomachine spewing bioweapon that wants to eat you with its claws and act very spider-like, that's a nice intimidation weapon too. And it's... I have nothing really bad to say about it except for the head looks really exposed. And I'm assuming with all the extra sensor equipment and everything in that head, it's probably not good if the head gets blown up.
No.
But for the most part, this is a very solid design. Even the rear has a concave shape, and when I went out and measured it, the rear has something like a overarching 33-degree slope, which means that it's almost at the perfect slope for the maximum amount of deflection from any angle. So even if you get behind it, it's still very well sloped and very well armored. Your only real choice, if you really wanted to knock it out, would be to get underneath it. And I don't know anybody in their right mind who wants to be underneath a Necron Tomb Spider.
There'd be few and far between, at very least.
Maybe some semi-suicidal catachans, but you know.
Well, you know how the catachan are like. They'll be like, it's just a Doom Spider. I knock bigger things off my wall before I go to bed at night.
The scary part is, I would believe them. They are kind of from Space Australia. Moving on to the obelisk.
Yes. The obelisk is the Necrons' main air defense weapon. They blast targets out of the air using Tesla spheres. And they're also, the walls of the obelisk are also lined with canoptic leeches, which are capable of repairing it during battle.
Okay, so first off, this is a vehicle? I thought this was all the pictures I have of this. It looks like a building.
It is a vehicle, yes.
How does it move?
It hovers. It has anti-grav technology built into it to move that way.
Okay. So all of the pictures I have, all of the models I've looked at, all of the research I've done, this thing literally if it's hovering / anti-grav, it's literally millimeters off the ground. Second off, Necrons have apparently figured out a way to fire ball lightning. We, as humans, today, still don't understand how ball lightning works or is really made. We know it's a form of lightning. We know it exists. We have photographic and video evidence of ball lightning. We have no idea how that type of formation occurs. That makes this incredibly scary for me, because I could not begin to calculate the amount of firepower a Tesla sphere would have contained within it shot at something. More importantly, if you're in an aircraft, the last thing in the world you want to hit you is a lightning bolt, because it's like being hit with an EMP discharge. Everything goes off for a second. A Tesla sphere hitting you would be like the equivalent of being hit by an entire squad of Tau Fire Warriors throwing EMP grenades at you. This is scary. Some of the Necron vehicles are truly scary. This is one of them. More importantly, it's just a giant obelisk of steel. There's no weak points. There's no obvious place to shoot it. The further down you go, the thicker it gets. The further up you go, the less you think that you'll actually make an impactful, meaningful damage if you hit it that high up. And it has the same shape and sloping all over, which, as it turns out, is 10 degrees. Not exactly the best armor sloping, but it means that it's one continuous sheet on every side of it of sloped armor.
Not to mention as well, it's also got the self-repair abilities as well.
Yeah, the self-regenerating is... Why aren't more Necron vehicles designed this way? Would be my biggest question. This is intimidating. This is scary. This has no discernible weak points on the entirety of the structure. This fires a substance that I can't even begin to engineer or understand or wrap my head around because there's no real data to use. And this I imagine would be pretty goddamn effective at shooting down aircraft. Because ball lightning travels at roughly 2,000-3,000 miles per hour basically, the way we understand ball lightning is the further away from the ground it is, the faster it goes. This means that it's firing a projectile that as it goes further into the air towards the enemy aircraft is still accelerating.
So let's put it this way, an Eldar wave weapon isn't going to outrun it.
There is no aircraft that will outrun this, because the longer that it's in the air, the higher up it goes away from the ground, the faster it's going. I don't care if you could do Mach 10. Ball lightning goes faster, because ball lightning will eventually reach the speed of light.
But when the main flaw of this, if, like, for example, it fires the Tesla sphere and it passes, say, near a building with a lightning rod, won't the Tesla sphere be discharged against that lightning rod?
No.
It won't.
This is what makes ball lightning so scary. It's the rarest form of lightning, but the reason it's so scary is because ball lightning has no discernible pattern to us as humans for how it seeks out what it's going to strike. It is known to chase people through their house, ignoring every other piece of conductive item in the house intent on striking the person. It is known to chase cars. It is known to chase aircraft. We don't understand it. We have video evidence of it, we have photographic evidence of it, and we also have medical record evidence as well as eyewitness accounts of the damage it inflicts. But we have no discernible way to figure out how it works. We do know that lightning rods are completely ineffective.
So suffice to say, if a Necron decides to shoot a Tesla sphere at you, you're fucked.
You're gonna get hit. Your best option is at the last minute to start throwing pieces of steel at the Tesla sphere, hoping you hit it with one of those pieces of metal and get it to discharge on that piece of metal. So I could imagine that a chaff field would be the best option, and you would have to wait till almost before it hits impact, then deploy the chaff and hope that it hits a piece of chaff and discharges. Because that is the one thing with ball lightning that we do understand. I'm comparing this to ball lightning because it's the closest comparison I truly have to a Tesla sphere. And that is, if ball lightning does hit something, it immediately discharges its energy directly into whatever it hit.
How effective would this be against Eldar and Tyranid organic-based armor?
If the armor is thick enough to get the lightning to dissipate, it would be ineffective. If, however, the armor is not thick enough, it would likely hit and in the case of the Eldar, it would fry all the electronics, or worse, it would electrify the person inside the vehicle to death until their eyes popped out of their head. In the case of the Tyranids, if the armored carapace is thick enough, the exoskeleton, such as on a Carnifex, it would dissipate off the armor. If, however, it did not strike the armor but struck, say, a venom sac or an exposed piece of tendon that has nerves in it, the creature would be electrocuted to death and be barbecue in seconds.
So it looks like so far this is actually the most devastating for the Necrons' war machines.
Again, I ask why more Necron war machines aren't designed this way. Because if they were, we'd be pretty screwed. Now, I asked you how this thing moved around, by the way, because I knew how it moved around, but looking at it, it looks like a building. It looks like it has no discernible way of movement. But, yeah. Knowing how it moves, knowing that it's literally only millimeters off the ground, and knowing what it fires, I would not want to be on the receiving end of one of these. Ever.
So it looks like for this one, at least, 10 out of 10 for armor, 10 out of 10 for firepower. The only thing it's going to be really lacking in is obviously be the speed. But then again, when you're firing weapons that can accelerate to the speed of light, that's not exactly going to be an issue.
Well, I would give it a 10 out of 10 for firepower. I would only give it a 7 out of 10 for protection because the armor is pretty flat. Even if it's got the same angle on all sides, it's still only 10 degrees, which is pretty flat for any amount of armor. And I would also cite that its protection is inhibited by its sheer size, i.e. it's a big target.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, it's got very good protection. The pylon, I believe, is our next little item, and this is where I start questioning Necron design philosophy again.
Yes. Now, the Necron pylon is a crescent-shaped, quote-unquote, defense turret. Now, unlike traditional turrets, pylons are not fixed in position. They can actually teleport, from what I can understand. They can be teleported into different positions and have obviously extremely large range of firepower thanks to their ability to traverse the firing elements of their primary weapon system, making them both a threat to land and air-based targets. It has a power matrix that's very similar to that of the monolith, which can be fired in one of two forms, as a particle accelerator or as a Gauss flux arc. It's essentially a larger version of the monolith's particle whip weaponry.
Okay. So first off, I'm really glad that this is not another ball lightning hurler, because I can at least understand what it's doing. Protection. What protection? This has no protection at all. The weapon system's completely exposed. The power matrix for the weapon system is completely exposed. It looks very delicate in terms of if a section of it were to get damaged, it's likely to overload. Mobility. Not only do these things, quote, teleport, but the deployment legs on the side can actually stand up and make it walk around. So it's a spider walker. Again, probably the most practical form of battlefield walker is to have 6 or more legs, and use that so that if you can still move with only 2 of them, and it really doesn't matter which 2, even if they're just dragging the rest of it behind it. So mobility wise, it's still really freaking it's got a mobility advantage. It does not have the most mobile ideas in the world. I mean, teleportation is really nice, but I imagine teleportation also means you're not firing the weapon system, you're letting it charge. And the spider legs are probably not terribly fast. Firepower-wise, yeah, this has got like monolith scale firepower that's both anti-ground and anti-air. But it doesn't have any protection at all. I picked up some of these models, I looked at them, and I'm like, every single facet of this thing is exposed to incoming fire. This is definitely a purely long to extreme range support turret. If something gets close to it, it's going to die.
Now, it does come in a second variety, which is the Gauss pylon. Now, the main difference between the two is purely the armament. Instead of having the particle whip, it is armed with a Gauss annihilator, which is similar to the particle accelerator, it's however much stronger. And it can also be equipped with a phase shift generator. Through a, quote, unknown mechanism, it allows nearby Necrons to shrug off fire that would usually render their armor useless.
So, first let's talk about the misnomer. Gauss. Gauss indicates rail weapon, not electric weapon. So there's a little misnomer for everyone. This is in fact should be referred to more as a particle accelerator or a Tesla gun. Second, I should have talked about that earlier. That's my fault, but the actual term gauze comes from the idea of an electrified magnetic rifle, i.e. a railgun. The next thing is the sheer firepower. I did some research on what a particle accelerator of this scale would be capable of doing to a target. Now, as you know, we have giant particle accelerators. We use them to research microscopic or beyond microscopic minuscule forms of matter, such as protons, electrons, neutrons, all those other wonderful things, as well as, in some very rare cases, create brand new elements. This, on this scale of this size, would literally tear apart a person or whatever it hits at a fabric of being level. You're talking about hitting a Lehman Russ and watching the tank literally evaporate because the particles are being physically destroyed from the impact into nothing but heat. Matter cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be turned into heat. And this would be turning stuff into heat. When I say heat, I don't mean the high explosive anti-tank ammunition. I mean literal heat. 2,000 to 3,000 degrees, just evaporating the metal into the air. The phase shift generator, I'm guessing, is some sort of shielding system. Now, from what I read, the phase shift generator doesn't always work. That's a problem, because the majority of this vehicle, just like its smaller cousin, the pylon, is extremely exposed and looks really delicate. If the phase shift generator doesn't work and a rocket gets through, I fully expect this thing to explode in a giant sphere of particle accelerated death, if you will. It does have the spindly little spider legs to walk around. It also, yes, in fact, does have a teleportation capability. But again, this is an long to extreme range support item. If something gets within battle range of it, you should expect it to explode and should get all your troops as far away from it as possible. Now, as far as the guidance system goes, I think that this is total overkill to fire at an aircraft. It's nice that it can shoot at ground and air targets, but it's probably complete and utter overkill to shoot at aircraft. And I know people go, there's no such thing as overkill. Well, sometimes it's more practical if you actually have a cannon to shoot at tanks and a different cannon to shoot at aircraft, trust me. Because sometimes there's very little point in firing 100... Yes, you can shoot down the Apache helicopter with your 120 millimeter cannon. But is it really worth the cost of the shell to fire at that Apache right now? Or should you probably fire an anti-air missile at it? 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to want to fire the anti-air missile. In this case, I'm guessing that whatever is operating this, because it looks like it's an automaton as well, which anything that's an automaton, I do give props for protection, because that means that you don't have a crew that can die. Yeah. It's probably going to have its target priority set for targets that it should fire at to destroy, as opposed to just randomly shooting at everything. But again, it's a very vulnerable thing. I give it props for being an automaton because there's no crew to kill, but I can see all of the firing mechanisms. I can see all the little wires. I can see it taking a hit in one of its 4 prongs, blowing the prong apart when it fires, and then the entire weapon system comes crashing down. Or worse, the accelerated particles inside go in every direction instead of in the focused beam direction you want it to go. So, 1 out of 10 for protection, but we still have a 10. The Necrons seem to not really be worried about protection so much as I want the biggest boom I can possibly mount onto something, and they really have achieved the biggest boom.
You can't really blame them for not wanting the protection again, because they, most of the time with a Necron, you shoot them, they're just going to get back up and carry on shooting you.
Exactly.
They are literally the most resilient race out there.
And in the case of using a particle accelerator as your primary weapon, I'm going to illustrate this for you. If a person were to stand inside of a particle acceleration chamber and be hit with the accelerator particle, they would vaporize. Literally. It doesn't matter that the accelerator particle is only it's so microscopic that we can barely perceive it. They would still vaporize from the impact.
Basically, you ever seen Watchmen? That film, that scene with Dr. Manhattan in the particle accelerator chamber?
Yep.
Yeah,
That would happen. So this, firepower-wise, this is truly scary. It seems like the Necrons have a lot of very, very scary boom. And not a lot of emphasis on protection because they're more relying on getting back up over and over again. So overall, the average protection on the Necron vehicles is very poor. I know it takes a lot to knock a Necron out permanently or to at least take it off the battlefield, but the overall protection is pretty poor. However, the overall firepower makes up for most of that. And in the case of the monolith, the protection is amazingly stupid, as with the obelisk. I'm wondering why more Necron vehicles are not designed like those two vehicles are. But that's what I have to say on them.
So out of all the races we've covered so far, we've covered the Imperium, we've covered the Orcs, we've covered the Tau, the Eldar, and now the Necrons. Out of all these 5, how high do the Necrons rank on the list? For sheer viability, survivability, and firepower overall.
The Necrons are a very, very solid second. The only reason that the Orcs beat them is because the Orcs actually have some idea of how to protect their vehicles and how to protect their crews. But hey, second place is not bad, especially when I'm pretty sure the Necron obelisk could kill most of the Orc vehicles with 1 or 2 shots.
Yeah. So we've got Necrons we've got the Orcs at number 1, Necrons number 2. Who was number 3? Would that be the Imperium or would that be the Tau?
I'm leaning towards the Tau because of the lack of mobility among the Imperium vehicles. Okay. If the Imperium vehicles were more mobile, the Tau would not have it. But since just because of sheer ability to go from point A to point B, the Tau do have it in this case.
Okay. So, in order, best to worst so far, we've got Orcs, Necrons, Tau, Imperium, Eldar.
And the Eldar are probably going to continue to move further and further down the totem pole, but we'll see how that works out. What do you guys want to see next time? Do you guys want to see squats, Tyranids?
Adeptus Mechanicus, Chaos?
Would you like to see a special on walkers, or would you like to see... I think there's one more. What am I missing?
Are you missing any races? Ooh.
The Inquisition is the one we haven't been mentioning, because the Sisters of Battle and the Grey Knights have some very interesting ideas on what armored vehicles should look and how they should work.
And let's be honest, nobody expects to see the Inquisition.
Especially the Mexican Inquisition.
Spanish Inquisition. Let's not offend Monty Python here.
Fair enough. I won't offend Monty Python
I
too
think
much.
Michael Caine would be upstairs like, we're not Mexican, we're Spanish. So yeah, that's it for this week's edition of Blitzkrieg. Let us know what race you want to see us to cover next. Write it in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe to 40K Theories and Fiaura the Tank Girl, and we'll see you all next time.
See you then. Bye bye, guys.